This video is brought to you by RV360 Solutions, where we're bringing the RV industry full circle by providing inspections, consulting, and training. Today we're going to take a look at actually a couple of different upgrades that I did to my Grand Design Reflection 303 RLS. So the first one is just to put this power water hose reel in, which, yeah, call me lazy I guess, but it's just I'm getting tired of trying to roll up my hose, especially in cold weather. So this comes with 35-foot half-inch water hose. You can get this with 3/4 inch hose, you can get a 50-foot hose, but these things are pricey. So I just wanted to take a look at this one, which is their lowest cost one, and it's got a switch right here. One thing that I have to caution you about is this thing does not have any kind of, automatic stop mechanism. So if you're holding that switch down and this thing comes to the end, it will just about rip this thing completely off of there. So aside from installing this new hose reel, I also decided that this is something I've been thinking about for a while now. I want some kind of automatic black tank flush. So typically you would connect your freshwater hose here. You would connect a different hose to your black water flush, and for me, I have really bad arthritis in my hands. It's just getting too hard to do this. I've used, different quick connects, and it just, I'm done with that whole thing. So what I did is, on the output side of this hose reel, there's just a half-inch NPT thread. So I got a 3-way valve. And what this valve does is, under normal circumstances, it's going to direct the water out in that direction. And then when I apply power to it, the water is going to come out and go in that direction. This 3-way valve, again, what it's going to do, it's just going to decide which way that water goes. So I've got some PEX plumbing here, and I put a couple of shut-off valves. This is going to plug into this freshwater hose receptacle here, and then this one is going to go into where the black water or the black tank flush would normally go. So I just added these shut-off valves just in case, if I ever want to turn the water off, if this thing malfunctions or whatever. And then I added this water flow sensor to the line that's going to my black tank flush. So that guy connects to this little box right here. I'm going to demonstrate how this actually works, but what I can do is just simply push this button, and it will send a pre-programmed amount of water through, so it'll automatically change this valve over, and it's going to send that water into my black tank flush. So for demonstration purposes, I don't know if you can see that, I have this thing set to 5 gallons. So when I push that button, it will send 5 gallons of water, and then it's automatically going to change over and divert the water back to the freshwater intake side of it. So yeah, I've tested this thing a couple times, works really well. So I just pulled it out to get my wiring all finished up here. So another thing I did while I'm in here is installed this 12-volt plug for my Macerator pump, and then I put a couple of switches in here and a couple of relays in there. So this one allows me to send power to my powered hose reel. So again, it's got a switch right here, but my concern is, hey, what if something, you know, going down the road bumps against that switch? This thing would eat itself. So I can power it up from there, and then this one will power up this plug that is going to go to my macerator. And then I can also use this, you know, for any other kind of 12 volt source that I need out here. Okay, so I'm going to walk through what is the final version of my automatic black tank flush. So yeah, in some of the other parts of this video, you'll see that this part of the plumbing right here has changed a little bit, and the reason for that is my initial design just brought this black tank flush back so that when I pushed this button, basically I was just sending water to my black tank flush. But what I wasn't doing is allowing that black tank flush to drain, and I'll talk a little bit towards the end of the video about why it's important to allow that to drain. Why, you know, if you're just plugging in a hose right here, why it's important to remove that hose, let that black tank flush drain. Let's just talk a little bit about some of the components here. So I have my automatic hose reel, which I put in a power switch right there that's connected to a relay. So when I want to power this thing up, I just need to turn this switch on. Then I also put a power switch in for my macerator, and it's also connected to a relay. So I've got my on-off button, and down on the side of my trailer, and I'll show you where that is, I put a 12 volt plug in so I can plug my macerator in, turn this switch on, and use my macerator. So this is the water coming in from the city water connection. It's going through my hose, and I put a valve right here, a manual valve, so whenever we're not using this thing, I can turn this valve off just to kind of help keep stuff out of my freshwater system. So down here I have my flow sensor, and over here I have my flow meter, and then I have another manual valve right here on the line that goes to my black tank flush. And again, when all is said and done, I'll just turn that off. So this is still gonna be allowed to drain. So on the end of this hose, and again, I'll crawl underneath there and get you a shot of that, but on the end of this hose is a solenoid valve that's normally open. So when no power is applied, that valve is open, and it's right now it just drains out to the bottom. I'm gonna put a little bit of a hose on there. So normally open means my black tank flush is always going to be allowed to drain whenever I'm not using this system. And then when I push the button to start this, it's going to close that valve as it opens this valve or changes this valve to allow water into my black tank flush. So I'm going to open this valve, and so right now there's water going into my freshwater connection. I have pressure on my hose. As soon as I push the run button, it's going to change the position of the valve back here to send water to my black tank flush. At the same time, it's going to close the valve, that solenoid valve, to keep water from draining out the bottom. And then when the system is done, so after it's pumped however much water it needs to pump, it's going to close that solenoid, or actually it's going to open that solenoid valve. It's going to change this three-way valve back so that it's feeding my freshwater system again. I'm going to pull my black tank valve, and we're sending water to my macerator pump. So I'm going to turn my pump on. So yeah, this is going to get a little bit noisy, and like I said, I'm just going to let this video run, and I'll edit part of this out. So here we go. We're going to drain that black tank. Okay, so I just turned my macerator pump off just so that you could hear in the video. Normally I would leave this running. So now I'm going to wake this guy up, and this is set to 10 gallons. So using this flow meter, it's going to send 10 gallons through my black tank flush, and I'm going to let it do that as my macerator runs, so that I'm flushing the tank out at this point. And then when I'm done, and after I've closed that black tank valve, that's when I'm going to drain my gray tanks. But I'm also going to use this same system to pump 5 gallons of water back into my black tank. So I'm going to go ahead and start this process, and you'll hear the motor on this 3-way valve change. You probably won't hear that solenoid valve, but the water is going to start to flow through my black tank flush. So here we go. So I'm not sure my camera is going to pick it up, but we're now pushing 2.48 gallons per minute through that black tank flush. So I'm going to turn my macerator pump back on and pump that tank dry as we're flushing this thing. Okay, so I just turned my macerator pump off because we reached our 10 gallons, and I'm sure you couldn't hear it because how loud that pump is, but my valve switched back, so now I have water going to my freshwater side, and that solenoid valve underneath the trailer opened back up, drained everything out of my black tank flush. So if I open this up now, you can see there's nothing left in this line. So I am sure that my black tank flush and that vacuum breaker in there is completely drained. So now what I'm going to do is close my black tank valve, and I'm going to start this process again, and I'm just going to run 10 gallons of water into my tank. And again, it's just going to beep at me. All right. So my 3-way valve is changing back. You can hear water draining out the bottom. And again, I will show you that here in a little bit. So I now have 10 gallons of water in my black tank. So I'm going to open that black tank valve again and start my macerator and drain this black tank completely. So I'm going to leave that black tank valve open, and I'm going to run another 10 gallon flush. So I'm going to leave my valve open, and I'm going to run another 10 gallons through it. And I'm going to start my macerator pump. Okay. So I'm going to turn my macerator pump off just so I can show you that once we hit 20 gallons, that solenoid valve opens, and because it takes, you know, a few seconds to close my 3-way valve, I get some pressure for a second. And now that water coming out of that solenoid valve right there is just draining that black tank flush. So you can see there's my macerator. There is the 12 volt connector that I put on the side of my trailer that comes from this switch right here. So overall, yeah, this system works exactly the way I had planned it to. So now I'm going to run my macerator for a little bit just to get everything out of that hose. Then I'm going to close my black tank valve, and I'll show you how I pump 5 gallons of water back into my black tank. Okay, so I'm convinced that my black tank is relatively empty right now. So I'm just going to close my black tank valve. And again, hopefully I can capture this. So what I'm going to do is, right now I'm at 30 gallons total. I'm just going to start this. Again, it's going to send water through my black tank flush. When this gets to about 35 gallons, which will mean there's 5 gallons back in that black tank, I'm just going to stop it here, and the same process will happen. So hopefully you can hear that there is water going through my black tank flush right now. And again, this solenoid valve is closed. It's normally open, so when it's got 12 volts applied to it, it is closed. And we'll just wake this guy up. We're at 32. So again, I always put, roughly 5 gallons of water back in my black tank, and then just dump some chemicals, whatever, deodorizer or something to break down the waste in the toilet. So for me, it's just so much easier to use this system to put that 5 gallons back in there. And so we're at 34 and a half. So it's going to take a second. So again, as soon as I hit stop, that solenoid valve opens. The three-way valve is changing position, so now I have water going here again. So because my black tank valve is closed, and I just put another 4.44 gallons of water in there, I know that I have approximately 5 gallons of water in my black tank. So the black tank flush is going to have something similar to this. You might call it, or you might hear it referred to as a vacuum breaker, anti-siphon valve. But basically, anytime we're connecting city water, which is, potable, sanitized water, to something like our black tank flush. So this tube on your RV would go out and connect to that flush inside the tank. So theoretically, this side of this system could very well be contaminated with feces, black water, just nasty stuff. So this vacuum breaker or anti-siphon valve is in the system to make sure that this water never backfeeds and could potentially get into the city water system. The way this anti-siphon valve works is there's a little plunger in here that, as the water pressure hits the bottom of it, that plunger is going to push up against a seat and allow the water to flow. Theoretically, as soon as we take the pressure off of this side, that plunger is going to drop back down and allow just normal atmospheric pressure air into this system so that it can't create a siphon, hence the name anti-siphon valve. So I like to use this particular one to demonstrate how this works because it comes apart really easily. So you can see it's got these slots in here, again, just open to the outside world. The little plunger that's in there. So this plunger has this rubber seal around the top. So as that water pushes it up, it's going to seat against this surface right here. So it's going to be sitting in there just like that. As soon as the water pressure is released from this side, see if I can do this, that plunger is going to drop down and allow air into this side of the system. So again, breaking any vacuum that may have been created in there. So we want this water to drain out. We don't want it to stand in this pipe, because if it does, the water is going to stay right at this level, and as this thing gets heated up during the day, that water is going to expand and it's going to want to trickle out, and it's going to cause a leak. And we don't want this to leak, because this actually sits inside of our RV, and it's going to be the highest point of this whole black tank flush system. So yeah, you can get quite a bit of water draining out of here. So let's talk a little bit about what happens if I leave my hose connected and have this valve closed so that I'm not allowing that water to leave. So let me turn this back on and let me show you, or maybe prove to you, that there is still water standing in here. So that water level is right at the top of this thing. Now, because that plunger and that O-ring on that plunger is what actually creates the seal, with this water standing here right now, there's nothing to keep it from leaking out and draining into my RV. So let me prove my theory here. All right, I'm going to turn this back on just to make sure that that is up to the height it needs to be. Now, that's another thing, is if I never let the water drain out of here, occasionally, you just saw some water come out of there, it's going to leak out. Because under normal circumstances, it's going to start with a column of air that's going to hit that plunger, so it's going to seal before the water gets there. If I leave the water in that tube, I'm going to get occasionally some water leaking out of here. Again, we don't want that to happen, because that is inside your RV. For the system to work properly, it needs to be able to vent here. It already vents to the atmosphere here. So definitely it's important that you disconnect your hose. If you have any kind of valve in line, open that valve up, and yeah, we don't want this thing leaking inside your RV.